Niall Kishtainy, A Little History of Economics. Embark on an intriguing journey through the ever-evolving world of economics, as A Little History of Economics by Niall Kishtainy takes you from ancient Greek philosophy with Aristotle to the modern-day dilemmas of income inequality. This book's summary offers you a concise, yet informative, tour of the most significant economic ideas, policies, and debates that have shaped our world. From the role of money and merchants in the early economy to the emergence of radical, laissez-faire economic thought, this mobile book summary app caters to an audience of curious knowledge seekers looking to navigate the complexity of economics.
Money's role in early economics. Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, can be considered one of the first economists, as he deeply pondered the concept of money in the 4th century BCE. Although he recognized its usefulness, he also feared that people might grow goods only for profit, naming this commerce and considering it unnatural. Early Christian thinkers shared his disdain for moneylending or usury. However, this practice gained popularity as it provided benefits to merchants who required funds for an expanding trade network. This shift led to the creation of the first banks and the growth of mercantilism, ultimately playing a key role in the shift from a medieval society ruled by religion and personal relationships to the industrial age where money took precedence. Aristotle, the legendary ancient Greek philosopher, can be credited as one of the earliest economists. His contemplation on the concept of money in the 4th century BCE led to the recognition of its benefits, such as determining an item's worth and enabling easy transactions between individuals. However, Aristotle also raised concerns about the dangers of money. For instance, a farmer might start growing crops solely for profit instead of producing just enough to support his family. He termed this phenomenon as commerce and considered it to be unnatural. The activities of moneylenders, charging interest on loans and profiting from debt, were deemed even more objectionable by the philosopher. Despite Aristotle's criticisms, commerce eventually gained momentum and proved to be an enduring economic force. Early Christian thinkers like St. Thomas of Aquinas shared Aristotle's aversion to moneylending, labeling it as usury. In his view, the only appropriate use of money was for buying and selling. Ironically, moneylending became convenient for the burgeoning trade networks of merchants in Venice and Genoa. These cities eventually saw the emergence of the first banks, which allowed merchants to store their profits and settle debts with ease. As peasants abandoned agricultural labor in favor of self-employment in cities, moneylending became increasingly widespread, even prompting the Catholic Church to soften its stance on usury. The era of mercantilism was ushered in when European merchant explorers discovered rich sources of gold and silver in new civilizations, looting them to amass wealth for their rulers. England, in particular, saw economists like Thomas Mun argue that supporting merchants was beneficial for the nation as a whole. Thus, special companies were established, such as the East India Company, where investors could pool resources and share profits. This paradigm shift signaled the decline of a medieval society dominated by religion and interpersonal ties, paving the way for the industrial age. Money, with its ability to shape economic life and systems, would become the driving force in world economics. Radical economics from industrial age. François Quesnay, a pre-revolutionary French economist, had a radical idea: eliminate taxes on peasants and place them on aristocrats. He believed that peasants, who worked with the land given by God, were the ultimate source of a nation's wealth. Quesnay was also against special privileges granted to merchants in the form of guilds. Instead, he advocated for laissez-faire economics, which called for minimal government intervention in the economy. This idea sparked a long-standing debate in the economic sphere. In Scotland, Adam Smith's groundbreaking work, The Wealth of Nations, introduced new concepts to the field of economics. Smith believed that society thrives when everyone acts in their own self-interest. Surprisingly, this led to societies functioning efficiently without any central decision-maker, as if guided by an invisible hand. Smith's work also addressed the changes brought by England's industrial age. As the country's wealth shifted from agriculture to industry, large factories emerged, and job opportunities became highly specialized. Smith explained this using the concept of division of labor. In a complex society, people specialize in specific jobs based on their skills and aptitude. This specialization extends to tasks within a job, resulting in a more productive and cost-effective economy. Lower costs mean lower prices, benefiting everyone in the society. However, not everyone gains equally from this system. Specialized jobs can be tedious and monotonous, as opposed to more generalist roles. For example, a worker hammering nails all day may find the task repetitive and dull compared to crafting an entire chair independently. Furthermore, the factory owner reaps the majority of the profits derived from increased production. Thus, despite advantages in efficiency and affordability, specialization has its drawbacks, with inequality and boredom among the workers being central concerns. Tackling wealth inequality. The 19th century saw a surge in wealth and privileges for the landowners and capitalists due to the rise of factories. A variety of economists grappled with issues of wealth inequality, with British stockbroker David Ricardo advocating for free trade, while early socialist thinkers like Charles Fourier and Robert Owen believed that communal ownership and sharing were key. Thomas Malthus argued that poverty was the result of laziness and people should not be given help. Ultimately, the most influential ideas stemmed from Karl Marx, who stated that communism would eliminate class differences in capitalist societies. Governments responding to worker exploitation paved the way for discussions surrounding the economic role of government in the 20th century. During the 19th century, England's factory boom gave rise to an unprecedented increase in wealth and privileges for landowners and capitalists. This drastic economic shift sparked debates around wealth inequality and the development of varying economic philosophies. David Ricardo, a British stockbroker, championed free trade as a means to combat inequality. At the time, Britain implemented laws prohibiting cheap foreign grain, leading to high grain prices that burdened workers. Ricardo argued that abolishing these laws would rectify the inequalities between workers, capitalists, and landowners. Although initially dismissed, this concept eventually gained traction in Parliament years later. Divergent views on addressing wealth disparities emerged as the century progressed. Early socialist thinkers such as Charles Fourier and Robert Owen felt Ricardo's ideas were too conservative, promoting communal ownership and sharing as the bedrock of a harmonious society. On the other hand, Thomas Malthus claimed that poverty stemmed from laziness, and withholding aid would encourage self-sufficiency. Arguably one of the most influential figures in addressing wealth inequality was German economist Karl Marx, who devised his groundbreaking theories of capitalism and communism in Das Kapital. According to Marx, workers owned only their labor and were thus inherently exploited by capitalists who owned the means of production. He asserted that capitalism would sow the seeds for a new society in which communism would erode class distinctions. Marx's theories, however, focused primarily on the realities of capitalism, leaving the specifics of a communist future largely undeveloped, a significant problem for later generations. As governmental awareness of worker exploitation grew, the 20th century saw a shift in how the state engaged with economic issues. European governments introduced unemployment benefits, funded universal education, and banned child labor. This evolution marked a pivotal moment, with the role of government in the economy becoming a central topic in economic thought for the centuries to come. Governing economic forces. Vladimir Lenin's implementation of Marx's ideas in the early 20th century resulted in the formation of the Soviet Union, which provided the world's first example of a communist state. As economists debated over the extent of government intervention in the economy, America's vast wealth and excess due to capitalism became increasingly evident. The varying perspectives on government involvement, along with Veblen's prediction of an inevitable crash, highlight the ongoing struggle to balance these competing economic forces. When Vladimir Lenin took control over Tsarist Russia in 1917, he did so based on Karl Marx's theories, aiming to establish the Soviet Union as a communist society free of imperialism. This ambitious project placed the government at the helm of the economy, enacting central planning rather than relying on market forces to set prices and allocate resources, a drastic departure from traditional capitalist systems. The Soviet Union's extreme approach to governance and economic planning was a source of debate, as economists sought to determine the right balance between government intervention and market-driven economies. In response to the hardships faced by the Soviet Union, such as a devastating famine in the 1930s, several economists, like Arthur Pigou, suggested governments should step in and manage negative side effects generated by individuals and companies acting in their own best interests. On the other hand, economist Ludwig von Mises argued against government price setting, stating that capitalism is the only rational economic system. He believed that markets function properly only when individuals comprehend the value of money and use it to pursue profit. Meanwhile, America's flourishing wealth at the hands of the nouveau riche, like the Vanderbilts and Carnegies, illustrated the excesses of capitalism. These industrialists reveled in their riches, showcasing their possessions in ways that Thorstein Veblen referred to as conspicuous consumption, a display meant to signify their exemption from labor. According to Veblen, this excessive behavior trickled down to lower classes, prompting a constant striving to keep up appearances that drove the economy forward. Ultimately, Veblen foresaw an unsustainable future, one where this constant pursuit of wealth and status would lead to a significant crash in the economy. The Soviet Union's fall and America's rise demonstrated the contentious relationship between government control and market forces, emphasizing the prevalent struggle to find a harmonious equilibrium between these economic powers. Governing economies, Boon or Bane. The Great Depression of the 20th century forced economists to question the role of government in managing economies. John Maynard Keynes argued that government intervention was necessary to stabilize a faltering economy. In contrast, Friedrich Hayek warned that excessive government control could lead to a loss of individual freedom and totalitarianism. After World War II, colonized nations like Ghana experimented with government-controlled economies to catch up with industrial giants. While this strategy failed in some countries, governments in others effectively harnessed state-controlled industries to achieve economic success, such as South Korea's Hyundai and Samsung. In 1929, the United States faced an unprecedented economic catastrophe known as the Great Depression. As unemployment soared, economists pondered how the world's wealthiest nation could fall into such deep poverty. John Maynard Keynes, an influential British economist, believed that government inaction caused the depression. He argued that, since both individuals and businesses became more cautious with their spending, government intervention was vital to rejuvenate the economy. Contrastingly, Austrian economist Friedrich Hayek cautioned against excessive government control. He astoundingly claimed that Britain's economic policies shared similarities with those of Nazi Germany, where the government strictly supervised the economy. Hayek predicted that unchecked government interference would erode individual freedoms and create an all-powerful, totalitarian regime. As the war concluded, nations worldwide grappled with defining the government's role in their economies. Colonized countries, such as Ghana, sought to utilize government control to accelerate development and compete with economically strong nations. While Arthur Lewis, Ghana's economic advisor, recommended a government-dominated economy, this approach hampered progress. Meanwhile, state-controlled businesses in South Korea flourished, becoming household names worldwide. Giants like Hyundai and Samsung exemplify how government involvement in the economy can drive extraordinary success when executed correctly. Economists continue to debate the ideal balance between governments and economies, as history reveals both the potential benefits and dangers of state intervention. Post-World War II economic shifts. After World War II, economists turned their attention to new challenges, contributing to the evolution of economic thought. They delved into microeconomic decisions, game theory, social issues, and tackled thorny problems such as global inequality. Some economists such as Gary Becker utilized economic principles to understand social phenomena, like crime. Meanwhile, the debate on capitalism's role in promoting or hindering progress intensified, with contrasting opinions from Cuban revolutionaries, the German economist André Frank, and evidence of rapid development in South Korea and other Asian countries. In the aftermath of World War II, economists shifted focus, developing new areas of study that explored both the big and small decisions that shaped the economy at large. Microeconomics emerged as a crucial area, seeking to analyze individual and company decisions that collectively form an economy. Simultaneously, the advent of the Cold War highlighted how political decisions could have far-reaching economic consequences. To assist these decision-makers in choosing the most strategic course of action based on opponents' predicted behavior, a team of American economists and mathematicians developed game theory. This groundbreaking perspective became equally relevant for geopolitics, individuals, and businesses. After World War II, economists also started addressing complex social issues. In the 1950s, Gary Becker pioneered the use of economic principles to understand social phenomena, such as crime. Becker posited that criminals, like other rational actors, weighed the costs and benefits of their actions. Consequently, the most effective way to tackle crime would be to ensure the potential costs far exceeded potential benefits. Yet, amid these developments, global inequality remained a pressing concern. Some argued that capitalism was the root cause of this disparity, notably Cuban revolutionaries Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. They believed that wealthier nations, primarily the United States, systematically exploited poorer countries. German economist André Frank supported this view, claiming that international trade disproportionately harmed less wealthy nations. However, these ideas were not universally accepted. Some Marxists maintained that socialism could only emerge from a highly developed capitalist system, which they believed was absent in Latin America. Skepticism aside, countries like South Korea showcased the possibility of rapid development under a capitalist framework, without requiring revolution. As the world transformed in the post-war period, so too did economic thought. The expansion of the field towards microeconomics, game theory, and applying economic analysis to pressing social issues, along with the ongoing debate on capitalism's role in global inequality, continued to shape the way we think about our world today. Rise and fall of Keynesianism. After World War II, Keynesian economics, which advocated for government intervention in the economy, became popular and was embraced by leaders like President Kennedy. However, economic challenges in the 1970s led to skepticism and the eventual decline of Keynesian policies. Economists like Milton Friedman and James Buchanan promoted alternative perspectives, such as supply-side economics and questioning the motivations of those in power, which would later be adopted by politicians like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. In the period following World War II, the economic theories of John Maynard Keynes, which emphasized the importance of government involvement in the economy, gained traction. Enthusiastic economists, known as young Keynesians, found practical ways to apply these theories, leading to widespread popularity. President Kennedy embraced Keynesian policy in the 1960s, implementing tax cuts aimed at stimulating the economy by putting money into the hands of consumers. The policy appeared successful, and even traditionally government-skeptic entities like the Republican Party were on board. However, by the late 1970s, with a rise in inflation, economists began to question if the successful economy of the 1960s could actually be attributed to Keynesian policies. As the economic downturn spread and led to widespread unemployment and inflation, protests in Britain in 1978 further fueled skepticism regarding Keynesian ideas. Economist Milton Friedman emerged as a prominent critic of Keynesian policies, asserting that markets should lead society, not government intervention. He believed that governments could not predict market outcomes and should instead focus on ensuring a fixed rate of growth in the money supply, aligned with economic growth. This approach, known as supply-side economics, prioritizes creating optimal business conditions, allowing for increased production, rather than giving more cash to consumers. Politicians like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were influenced by Friedman's ideas, although many argue that their strict monetary policies worsened the economic downturn in the 1970s. Another significant critique of Keynesian economics came from American economist James Buchanan, who questioned the trustworthiness of governments in executing these policies. Buchanan posited that politicians, driven by the same self-interest as everyone else, would use government spending to stay in power, regardless of its actual economic impact. Thus, he implied that relying on government intervention may not always be the most effective approach to managing the economy. As a result of these alternative perspectives and the economic challenges of the 1970s, the once popular Keynesian economics lost its charm and gave way to a new era of economic thinking, driven by supply-side economics and a renewed focus on market-driven societies. The turbulent financial landscape. The financial world transformed dramatically from the 1980s onwards as bankers evolved from their conservative reputations to risk-taking cowboys. They unabashedly speculated on commodities and currencies, reaping massive profits that made their tactics alluring to ordinary investors. However, the unbridled risk-taking led to catastrophic collapses in speculative bubbles. From the dot-com bubble of the 1990s to the housing market crash of 2007, financial devastation shook the global landscape. In response, the world turned to Keynesian principles to revive economies and implement safeguards against future crises. Gone are the days when bankers were staid men in tweed suits, making cautious decisions. The financial landscape shifted in the 1980s as daring, big risk-taking, cowboy bankers emerged from the shadows. These new players in the industry would speculate on commodities such as oil or wheat, attempting to predict future prices and buying huge quantities based on those estimates. If their predictions proved accurate, they'd cash in on significant profits. This speculative behavior extended to currencies, with notable figures such as George Soros reaping enormous rewards. In one case, in 1992, he destabilized the Bank of England and earned a cool £1 billion. Such lucrative practices captivated armchair stock traders, but this high-stakes game carried serious consequences. The onset of the 1990s saw the birth of groundbreaking tech companies peddling innovative products such as web browsers and search engines. Eager investors flocked to snap up shares in these startups, inflating stocks and creating a frenzy of activity in the markets. The dot-com bubble exploded, erasing $2 trillion and decimating fortunes while shuttering countless companies. However, despite the fallout, the allure of profit remained irresistible, and a new bubble soon took shape: the housing market. The catastrophic collapse of the U.S. housing market in 2007 reverberated throughout the global economy. Hyman Minsky, a lesser-known economist, believed that capitalism grows increasingly unstable as it matures. His theories suggest that as economies progress, people and banks get bolder, borrowing and lending more recklessly to maximize profits. Banks begin to extend loans to those who may struggle to repay, betting that rising house prices will provide a safety net. Yet, as defaults on loans and property sales accumulate, house prices plunge, and investments freeze, causing the economy to retract, as witnessed in 2007. To grapple with the ensuing economic crisis, world powers like the US and China turned to Keynesian thinking, boosting spending in an attempt to revive their respective economies. The legacy of these strategies persists today as policymakers navigate the unpredictable world of finance, striving to balance growth and stability. Unraveling inequality's complexity. Growing up amidst the violence between Hindus and Muslims in Bangladesh, Indian economist Amartya Sen became determined to uncover the underlying causes of inequality. He recognized that poverty extends beyond lack of material goods, instead encompassing a deprivation of essential capabilities and opportunities, such as access to education and transportation. Sen's work inspired the development of the United Nations Human Development Index, which measures factors like income, life expectancy, and literacy to gauge societal progress beyond just economic growth. Additionally, Sen took interest in the gender bias in economics, noting how male perspectives dominated prevailing economic analyses. A new wave of feminist economists gained traction in the 1990s, questioning the traditional economic narratives that often neglected the immense unpaid labor performed by women. This oversight left women at a systemic disadvantage in the distribution of essential resources like wages, food, and healthcare. Feminist economists advocate for social change and policies targeted at addressing discrepancies between men and women, as well as correcting global inequality more broadly. However, tackling this problem requires a multifaceted approach that goes beyond poverty and gender disparities. The rich continue to accumulate wealth at an unprecedented rate, with French economist Thomas Piketty attributing this to capitalism's inherent propensity for perpetuating existing wealth. To counter this wealth concentration, some economists propose higher minimum wages and increased taxes on the wealthy. Yet, governments have instead reduced taxes on the rich since the 1970s, and income redistribution appears unlikely in the foreseeable future. As a result, economists today must devise creative strategies to address and dismantle the complex layers of persistent inequality on multiple fronts.
In conclusion, A Little History of Economics offers an engaging and accessible view of pivotal economic theories, policies, and forces that have transformed civilizations through time. As you traverse from Aristotle's thoughts on money to modern-day inequalities and capitalist critiques, the book's summary underscores the key takeaways that have driven the evolution of economic understanding. The valuable insights provided by Niall Kishtainy vividly portray the constant pursuit of knowledge relevant to trade, wealth distribution, and government involvement. To be equipped with such historical comprehension allows an individual to better grasp and participate in the ongoing economic debates shaping our world today.